someone say something?
Revelio. Lumos. Revelio. Yes. Revelio. Confringo. Alohomora. Revelio. Confringo. Leviosa. Revelio. Confringo. Incendio. Expelliarmus. Glacius. Also. Levioso. Arresto momentum. Also. Accio. Revelio. 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 Accio. Revelio. Alohomora. Revelio. Revelio. Finite. Revelio. Finite. Incendio. Confringo. Finite. Expelliarmus. Glacius. Finite. Revelio. Lumos. Lumos. Finite. 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 Ha. Revelio. Lumos. Ha. Ha. Revelio. Ha. Revelio. Revelio. Professor Sharp, could I ask you about my extra assignments?
Professor Weasley's asked that I give you some assignments to hasten your education. Nothing more to it, really. Once they're completed, return to me, and I shall know that you're ready to learn Defendo. This is hardly the place.
Professor, I saw an aura badge on your desk. May I ask about your time as an aura?
Observant. I suppose I could indulge you for a moment. Spent years tracking down reprobates who dealt in artifacts of dark magic origin.
That seems a bit more dangerous than teaching potions.
Often, yes. Though I've seen some remarkably creative concoctions brewed in my class. I enjoyed a great deal of success as an aura. However, success can make one complacent if one's confidence is not tempered by humility. One overstep in battle changed everything.
May I ask what happened?
Yes, well, I suppose it's a matter of record. My partner and I had tracked a suspect to a harbor in Scarborough, trying to smuggle shrunken heads of all things. I had deduced that he was working alone. I was mistaken, and they knew we were coming. From the moment we stepped onto the ship, well, I barely escaped with my life. My partner wasn't so lucky.
I suppose being an aura is dreadfully dangerous. I'm sorry.
It is at that. But survival... Pay attention. And not just within my class. This is what I must impress upon you all.
Well said, Professor. Revelio.
Just got a minute for you, guys. You should download that document from the chat before we begin. This is half past, guys, but I think we should wait one more minute because I'm expecting 12 people and there's only 4 people here. Just wait one more minute, maybe. Okay, yes, despite there not being too many people, we better get started. It is 31 minutes past. So hopefully you guys downloaded that document from the chat. If you have the book, page 74 is where this page comes from, although you do need the document as well. And I think we'll just get straight into looking at some part 1 questions today to begin with. We got the topic of museums on this page from the book. And if you guys have a look at the second page of the document, put some extra questions here. 2 topics, laughter and flowers. But as usual, part 1, relatively easy questions, mostly about yourself. And I think we can just get straight into looking at a few sample answers here before we do a little practice. So, for example, let's take a look at a laughter question firstly. Number 3, these pointing for friends have the same sense of humor. Now, let's just quickly go over this phrase, sense of humor. So when we get this phrase here, so in sense of humor is basically what somebody finds funny. What they think is funny is a sense of humor, we could say, right? So do you think it's important for friends to have the same sense of humor? Well, let's take a quick look at what I said for this one. I don't think you absolutely have to find the same things funny as your friends. There are many things you can build a relationship around. Okay, let's just stop there for a second. In fact, we put in this kind of phrase, right? Find same things funny. Can, of course, be a good idea to kind of find ways to slightly change the phrases from the questions, if possible. And just giving a basic reason here as well. There are many things you can build a relationship around. We should probably add in another sentence or two just to make this long enough. Let's take a look at this next sentence. However, if you can have a laugh and joke around people, it would definitely help you to bond with them. Okay, let's mention 1 or 2 other things here as well. I would say a really good thing to consider is how to use common words that you already know, but how to use them more specifically. Like Eric and all of you guys know laugh and you know the word joke, right? But here, just the more specific phrases of to have a laugh. Do we get here? Now, quite commonly we use like to laugh as a verb, but particularly in British English, British people say this a lot, to have a laugh with somebody. So it's quite a natural way to say that. And as well as that, we then get to joke around, particularly putting in the word around here. To joke around or joke around with someone. Very natural ways to use these words. So not only learning individual words, but learning more specifically how to use them and the little phrases you might use them in can really help sound more natural. So these are two good ones here: to have a laugh or to joke around with somebody. We can even put in with somebody with this one as well. But these two phrases are really good to use here. Very natural. And what about that verb at the end, to bond with them? I reckon a lot of you guys should know this already. Remember, to bond? To bond is kind of like to form a stronger relationship, right? In other words, to strengthen your relationship, right? To make it stronger. So some good phrases to learn now, like saying, just learning these more specific ways to use those common words is a very good idea. Help you sound more natural. Anybody any questions though? Okay, if not, let's take a look at some other ones as well. For example, we've got an answer for the fifth question. Flowers question here. Flowers given as gifts in your country. So let's take a quick look at this one. I think it's a fairly straightforward question. Yeah, flowers are used as presents sometimes. For instance, it's pretty common to give flowers to your mum on Mother's Day. You might give them someone you're in a romantic relationship with, like a spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend. Okay, just giving some examples here of the kinds of situations in which we might give flowers as gifts, as presents, mentioning like your mom on Mother's Day, or maybe someone you're in a romantic relationship with. Let's just quickly remind ourselves of the noun spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend. A spouse is basically a husband or wife. Anybody any issues there? Okay, if not, let's have a quick look at an answer for one from the book, a museums question. Do you enjoy going to museums when you were a child? Pretty common kind of question to get. Probably going to need some past tenses here. Put some past tenses in. And a yes or no question. Should be pretty direct with my main answer at the beginning. Yeah, I love going to museums when I was a kid. Again, we should explain that a little further. I remember we visited the science museum once on a school trip, and there are all kinds of interactive features as part of the exhibitions. It was still learn in a fun way. So it's much more interesting than just learning in the classroom. Okay, just giving some explanation of my memories of going to museums as a kid. Let's mention things like, I think the word interactive is maybe a word we should mention here. So when we get a word interactive, particularly in this kind of situation, like an interactive feature, when we get this situation, it means like you're actually doing something with this feature, the exhibition. You're not just reading or looking at something, you're actually doing something, right? So interactive can mean able to be interacted with. In other words, actually doing something with it, right? So in this way, we're not just reading about like the science, we're actually doing something to help us learn, right? Be more interactive, we could say. Like saying, particularly just be careful with your tenses when it comes to grammar. When are we talking about? When we were children, right? So past tenses, I love going to museums when I was a kid. I remember we visited a science museum. Just be careful with the grammar though. Anybody any issues for that one? Okay. If not, let's take a look back at the other questions that we had before we do a little practice. So firstly, just going back to the laughter questions, I don't think you need to say too much about these two here, right? Do you like to make people laugh? Do you think you're a funny person? Relatively easy questions. Anybody any particular issues? Those laughter ones. Okay, and the flowers ones. Do you like flowers? And number 6, do any flowers have a special meaning in your culture? Well, let's just quickly mention here. I just briefly mentioned earlier that we might want to try and find ways to just change the words a little bit from the question. Maybe some good ways that we could do that for number 6 here. Any flowers have a special meaning? Because if we are trying to change that phrase, I think there's a few phrases we could use here. Maybe some good verbs. For instance, to symbolize, maybe could be used here. So, of course, to symbolize is basically like to be a symbol of something, right? It kind of represents this thing. In fact, to represent would be quite similar in meaning, right? So, let's just take an example actually, of how we can use those phrases. So, maybe we could say something like roses symbolize, or we could have represent. And what do they symbolize? Maybe romance, right? Like, so you might give them to like your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend. So, what's a good idea? Try and think about how you could change the word slightly from the actual question. Anyway, anybody in issues with those flowers questions though? If not, let's have a quick look back at the museum questions. So I've already looked at that first one. Do you enjoy going to museums when you're a child? So are there any interesting museums near where you live now? I think it's best to go to museums by yourself or with friends. And when you visit another city or country, I think it's important to go to a museum there. Okay, as usual, relatively easy questions in part 1. Anybody any particular issues before we do a little practice of those? Okay, if not, let me just copy those notes, you guys, in case you missed any of those. And still not too many people here, so we're just going to have a group of 2 and a group of 3, I guess. So I'll just arrange a couple of groups, and then you guys can go and do some practice with your partners. Try and have a go at some of the museums questions, some of the flowers questions, and some of the laughter questions. Try and have a go at as many of those as you can. I'll have time to listen to you guys at least 1 or 2 answers for everyone. There's not too many people here today. Anybody any issues? Okay, if you guys want to go join your partners, have a go at some part 1 questions to start off with. Okay, guys, I think everyone's back in here now. Anybody, any particular problems? Part number 1. If not, we can, of course, move on to part number 2. Remember, in part 2, we get a topic that we need to speak about for up to 2 minutes. Remember, in the real exam, you get 1 minute to prepare your answer. Our topic always begins with describe something. We get 4 points that we should say, that we should include. Remember, of course, you can include anything connected to the main topic, though. So we've got this one here on the 3rd page of the document, which I'm going to focus on. A time we enjoyed visiting a member of your family in the home. If you prefer, though, a little bit later, you could have a look at this one. I won't go over this one in as much detail. Piece of work you did for your job or your studies that you felt very satisfied with. So if you prefer, you could have a go at this one. I think I'll focus on the one on the 3rd page of the document, this one here. So I don't think we need to say too much about the understanding of this topic here. Simply time enjoyed visiting a member of your family in a home. Remember, in part 2, usually the topics are about yourself, maybe some kind of experience that you've had, right? Pretty common kind of thing to appear. So here we got a time when you visited a member of a family in a home. Anybody any specific questions about this one? I think not too tricky to understand, right? We should, of course, say who we visited and where they lived, why you made this visit, what happened during this visit, saying what you enjoyed about this visit. I'd say we're probably going to focus, I guess, mostly on like these 2 points here. Probably can talk a lot about what you actually did, although we should try and include these points as well. So don't really say too much else before we get into my sample answer. Maybe should be talking for 2 minutes in quite a lot of detail. Try to add in plenty of information if possible, okay? So let's take a look at what I mentioned here. And to begin with, I said, I'm going to tell you about a trip I took back to my home country. This is my family, which I spent time with them in their homes. In particular, I think I'll focus on the time I spent with my mom. Okay, let's just quickly stop there for a second. I just want to remind you guys of one particular thing here, which some of you might have heard me say before. I'm not sure if you guys remember. Here, a good natural phrase to use to spend time with somebody, right? Pretty natural way to express this idea. A pretty natural way to express this idea. Remember, one phrase we don't really want to use here is to accompany somebody. Now, some of you guys may remember that to accompany somebody can mean to go with somebody to somewhere. But it's not really very commonly used, and it is particularly when we're going somewhere to a place, right? So I'd recommend in this kind of situation, you are visiting them, you're just going to the home, maybe you're spending time with them in the home, okay? But just be a little careful. We probably don't want to use this word in this situation, okay? To spend time with somebody is more natural, all right? Anybody, any questions? Okay, if not, let's continue. Let's start by giving the reason for visiting her, which is simply because I hadn't seen her in person for extremely long time, around 5 years. It's due to the global COVID pandemic restricting international travel. So they returned to UK between 2018 and 2022. True story, had to stay in Taiwan for a long time and not go back to the UK because of COVID. I don't think need to say a lot about this part, although maybe you guys should remember. Good idea. Try and organize your answer very clearly. If we're giving like the first main point, I'll start by giving you this information. So do try and organize your answer clearly. Use these kinds of phrases to make it obvious what kind of information you're giving next, okay? Let's go down to this spot. And again, thinking about organization, another one you guys might remember, moving on to where she lives. The region of the country that she lives in is called West Yorkshire. It's located in the north of the country. It's well known for a couple of things, including the scenic countryside. We see rolling green hills, natural woodland, and fields full of sheep and cows. In fact, the scenery and fresh air is one of the things I love about where she lives. Okay, so mentioning where she lives here, I'm giving a little bit of detail as well, not just saying the name of the place. Give me some background information, maybe that. Let's also mention this adjective, scenic. We can see the connection to our noun, scenery, here, right? So scenic as an adjective, this basically means like having beautiful scenery. It's a very positive word, right? So scenic countryside. Anybody got any questions about that part? Okay, and another phrase to connect and introduce the information when it comes to. This one's very similar to like I'm moving on to. Again, which kind of introducing this as like our focus, our topic that we're going to talk about. So when it comes to what happened, well, I mostly just wanted to spend some time with her and relax. Because as I've already mentioned, I hadn't seen her for ages. But apart from just relaxing, just did some activities, such as going hiking around a nearby reservoir. I won't say a lot about this spot, just a couple of phrases to mention. Ages. I hadn't seen it for ages. So when we use the word ages, it basically just means like a long time. It's a very natural phrase, very commonly used. And let's also mention the word reservoir. Some of you guys might know this, some of you might not. The reservoir, I guess they could be natural, but quite commonly are going to be like a man-made lake. Although sometimes they could be natural, but quite commonly will be man-made. And usually that is used for storing water. So maybe it's like part of the water supply for a country. You know, they use the lake to store water that they can use. Let's have a quick look at the next sentence. Personally, I love spending time in nature. So doing some outdoor activities like hiking is a must for me. And traveling to a new place. Okay, now must. Everybody knows the word must, but see how it's being used here. It's being used as a noun, right? It's not normally how we use it. So must as a noun, well, this just means something you must do or have, right? Implying that it's like a really good thing or something you really enjoy, right? It's a must. We particularly often have an A in that. So if something is a must, it's something you must do or have, something you love, you really enjoy it. It's a must for you, we could say. So using that as a noun, pretty natural as well. Anybody got any questions about that part? Okay, let's move down to this following part. Actually, this is the first time I'd visited the town where she lives because she had moved house since I last saw her. So I spent some time exploring the town as well. It's a pretty typical rural Yorkshire town, many old stone buildings and a long history. I remember one interesting and fairly unusual thing I came across was a group of people practicing ringing the church bells. Actually allowed us to come inside the church tower, so doing it, give some information about the activity. Okay, just giving some more information about what I did. I don't think I need to say too much about the language there. Anybody got any issues with that part? Okay, apart from that, as I mentioned, I had plenty of time to relax and do things I enjoy. One of which is cooking. So I took advantage of free time I had to cook some delicious dishes, especially some using ingredients which can't easily be found in Taiwan, sort of waxy potatoes. So overall, just want to see my family again. Hope you were to take another trip back there soon. Okay. So, like I was saying, I think particularly for this topic, we can probably focus mostly like on these second 2 points. But of course, as we saw, we could maybe give a little detail about the other points as well. For example, like where they live, give me some background information about maybe the town or place where they live. Really good idea, adding plenty of detail if you can. Try and talk for 2 minutes. Anybody got any issues with this one? Kevin said, Waxy, you don't really need to worry about this phrase, Kevin. It's just like a particular type of potato. It just describes like the texture of the potato. Maybe wax is like a material, but it's like just a word describing the texture of the material. Excuse me, the potatoes. It's not really important to learn it. Anybody else got any other issues though? Okay, so I think this topic's a good one to practice. I'm sure you guys have visited some of your family members before, right? Or if you prefer, though, feel free to look at that other one, piece of work you did for your job or your studies, you felt very satisfied with. So as usual, I give you guys a few minutes to prepare your answers. Anybody got any issues though? Okay, remember you should take down some notes, have a think about what you want to say. Afterwards, we can practice. Any questions? Okay, take a few minutes, do some preparation. If you do have questions, send me a message or let me know. It's going to take a few minutes to prepare firstly, okay? Just take another minute to prepare. Just another minute. Okay, guys, that should have enough time to prepare. That's at least 3 minutes. Remember, in the real exam, only 1 minute to prepare. Anybody any specific issues before we practice? Okay, if not, let me open your groups again. If you guys want to go and join your partners, have a go at one of these topics. Try and talk for 2 minutes if you can on the topic. Okay, guys, we can move on to part number 3 now, unless anybody has any questions. If not, let's move on to part 3. If we return to questions from the book, we see here we have topics connected to being satisfied and satisfaction. Because in this topic from the book, we had a piece of work you did for your job, your studies, you felt very satisfied, very happy with, right? That's what we're going to continue talking about in part 3, at least for these questions from the book. I did put a few extra questions further down as well. I decided to continue the topic of jobs there. Got a few extra questions in connection to that topic. Just remember that our questions in part 3 are more general, meaning not as much about yourself. Sometimes can be quite difficult, especially towards the end of part 3. As usual, we'll take a look at some sample answers here. We might have time to look at all of these ones, perhaps. Let's take a quick look at this one here, I think, to begin with. The topic of jobs. And some people believe it's necessary to have a degree to get a good job. Do you agree with that? Now, firstly, I think hopefully you guys know the word degree. Of course, a degree, what you might study for in university, right? So what we might call the qualification you'll get, the type of education you have from university, that would be a degree. So some people think it's necessary, like you have to have a degree to get a good job. So let's take a look at the answer. It seems to be a common belief, but I don't really think that's true. Okay, I don't think it's true. In other words, I don't really agree with that, right? Let's give some reasons, I think. The main reason is that what is considered to be a good job really varies a lot from person to person. That is, people have many different criteria when it comes to looking for a job. Okay, let's just stop there for a second. I just want to go over this sentence. Firstly, that is, we're using that is as a connecting phrase. It could be quite similar to phrases like in other words, explaining something in another way. So kind of explaining what I've just mentioned in another way or in more detail. We should also note the word criteria. So criteria, we could maybe say that this is what somebody is looking for when making a decision. What are they paying attention to when they're making a decision, right? So if you're looking for a job, if you're choosing what kind of job you want to do, what aspects of the job will you pay attention to, will you look for, right? Those would be the criteria that you want in a job. Let's explain that further. Some people focus on the pay, some on the type of work, some on the potential for career advancement. Okay, so giving some examples of different criteria that people might consider. And maybe you guys know, by the way, of course, advancement. Advancement, we see NA and MENT must be a noun, right? Connected to our verb to advance. We do sometimes use this with career advancement. Maybe you guys know to advance is like to progress, right? So we want to be able to progress in our career, maybe get a better job at a later stage of our career, right? So if there's a multitude of occupations that are considered to be good, then surely those jobs will have a variety of requirements. Some require degrees and some will not. Okay, let's mention 2 words here as well. I do expect, hopefully, most of you guys know the word occupation. An occupation, basically just a type of job, right? And multitude, a multitude of occupations. We see multitude is a noun, but it basically just means like a lot of something, right? So multitude of occupations, a lot of occupations, right? Anybody any issues with that part? Okay, so let's give it one more sentence here at the end. However, I will admit that having a degree probably gives you more options if you're job hunting, but it's definitely not totally required to secure satisfying employment. Now, let's just note here, job hunting. We might use the word hunting in this specific situation. In this situation, hunting is gonna mean basically like looking for, right? We're hunting for something. So job hunting, we're looking for a job, right? It's a common way we might use that word. Anybody any particular issues though? Okay, if not, I think we'll have a look at least one more. Let's look at this one. This one taken from the book Being Satisfied in Life. We say ambitions in life, because we having ambitions in life is always a positive thing. Now, hopefully you guys know the word ambition. If not, I think you should learn this word. In fact, what I put here at the start of my answer, ambitions or goals, well, that's what an ambition is, some kind of goal, right? So is it always positive? Or maybe could it be a negative thing in some situations? Let's take a look at what I said. Nope. I don't think having ambitions or goals is always going to be beneficial. Okay, just remember at the start of your answer, it's a good idea. Be pretty clear, be obvious with your main answer. This one's yes or no. Yes, I would say this, or no, I wouldn't say this. So be quite clear, be obvious with your main answer. And of course, we need to explain that. Why would it not always be beneficial? Why would it not always be positive? Well, firstly, because someone is constantly looking ahead to what they might achieve in the future, they may overlook what they have right now and fail to appreciate that. So it could really be an obstacle to being content with their life. A couple of bits of language to mention here as well. Some of you guys might know constant or constantly. Constant would be an adjective, constantly the adverb. So these two words here, very similar, really, to just like always, something continuing and not stopping, like it's always happening. It's constant. And they may overlook what they have right now and fail to appreciate that. So overlook, a verb meaning to ignore or to not notice. So you might not notice what you do have in your life already. You might not appreciate that. You might not feel happy with that. And what about this phrase at the end? Be an obstacle to being content in their life. So obstacle is a great noun to learn. An obstacle could be something that, let's say, makes something more difficult, or maybe that prevents something from happening. And what about being content? Content is pretty similar to happy. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar kind of idea. Like you're happy, you're satisfied with your life, right? What you mentioned, satisfied as well. So if it's an obstacle, it kind of stops you from being happy, right? Because you're always thinking about the future and not focusing on maybe what you have now. Let's take a look at this next part. In addition, I reckon there are a lot of people who just adopt popular ambitions without really considering whether they really want that, whether it will benefit their life. In other words, they just follow the crowd. More bits of language to quickly mention here. I'd say to adopt, a really good word to learn if you guys don't know this already. To adopt something can mean to take something from somewhere else and maybe like to start using it or having that thing. So in this case, not really using, let's say like using an ambition, but maybe they just take this kind of ambition from someone else. Say, oh, they want to do this, so therefore I want to do it as well, right? They're adopting that ambition. And we got to follow the crowd. It might have been in last week's class. I think we maybe saw this a similar phrase. Last week's speaking class, I think. To follow basically mean to do the same as, right? And of course, a crowd is like a group of people. Here's thinking about like people in general, right? So some people might just follow the crowd, have the same ambitions as other people without even thinking about it, right? For instance, they may see other people owning expensive cars, and out of envy, decide they want an expensive car too. Not really thinking about it more deeply. Okay, and let's quickly mention the word envy. Some of you guys might know this one. Or you might know envious as an adjective. So if you're envious, you're wanting what other people have. So you see someone with this thing, you think, oh, I want that. You know, it's kind of a negative feeling as well, right? You're envious of them, you could say. So envy is like that feeling. Anybody any issues though? Okay. What time is it? 4:36. Maybe we won't go over this one together actually. I went over quite a lot of bits of vocabulary, the previous one. You guys could have a look at this third one in your own time if you'd like to do so. I'm gonna just copy these notes to you guys in case any of you guys missed these. Where from here. And of course, I'll send you guys back to your groups to practice some of these part 3 questions in just a second. Before that, let's have a quick look back at the other questions, just make sure we understand them. For example, going back to these ones here, what kinds of occupations are well respected in your country? Well, we've already mentioned occupations like the types of job, right? So maybe, for example, let's say some people might think that being a doctor, doctors are like well respected or something like that. So we just want to give like maybe a couple of different types of job, try and explain in detail why are they respected? Why do people think these are good jobs to have? And do you think there's more competition in the job market today than there was in the past? Remember, questions comparing the present with the past, very common. Just remember the job market. This basically is referring to everyone who is trying to find a job, right? So that would be the job market. So is there more competition? Is it more difficult to get a job because you're competing against more people, perhaps, compared to in the past? Anybody got any issues with these ones? Okay, and going back to the first page of the document, a few of the ones here. So this one here, what are some aspects of people's lives they can often be dissatisfied with? Hopefully you guys can see dis is a negative thing, right? So dissatisfied, they're not satisfied, like they're not happy with those aspects of their lives. And this one here, what do you believe the most important components are for satisfying life? Ooh, good word here. Component. So a component would be an individual part of a larger thing. So in your whole life, well, maybe there are many different parts of that, right? So different components of your life. So what are the most important components, the most important parts of having a satisfying life? Anybody got any issues with those ones? Okay, and finally, the job satisfaction ones. What makes a job more satisfying is the high salary or having good colleagues. Don't think you need to say too much there. I do expect you guys should know, of course, a colleague, a co-worker, someone you work with. And do you think people need to change jobs regularly? Do you want to stay satisfied at work? Is it possible to find job satisfaction in all types of work? I think those two at the end, not too complicated to understand the meaning of. Anybody got any specific issues here? Okay, if there's no problems, we can get started with a little bit of part 3 practice. I'll come and listen to probably all of you guys again. Should have time to do so. Let me just open your rooms. If you guys want to go join your partners, I've got some part 3 questions, okay? Okay, guys, yep, pretty much out of time now. Anybody, any specific questions before we finish? Okay, if not, thank you guys. We'll stop there for today. If you guys do have any questions or problems, I can stay for a couple of minutes. But thank you guys. Maybe see you another time, okay?
Thank you.
No problem. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.